Okay, I have 10:30 on the dot on my calendar, so I want to just respect everyone's time and get going. So my name is Aisha Dixon. I'm the director of the UCLA Emeriti Retiree Relations Center. And thank you for all for coming to this important conversation. It kind of came about just with the wildfires in Southern California and just the following earthquake and just kind of making sure everyone's prepared as best they can be because disasters will happen and we want to make sure, especially with our constituency, that people are prepared. So I first want to thank our team here at the ERRC. We're a small but mighty team of three. So Nicole is here as well as Lamb, who are both our retiree resource specialists. They kind of help us juggle over 19,000 retired faculty and staff, and next of kin, and survivors, and community partners at UCLA. So we really want to thank them for all the hard work and Nicole putting this program together with the Office of Event Management. I did open up this Zoom to all of our sister campuses, which I recognize some from San Francisco, some from across town at USC. So thank you all for coming because no matter where you live, there's probably going to be some kind of disaster. So I don't want this to be fear mongering in any way, but for us to be prepared. So I will introduce you to a couple of speakers. Lisa Martin is the director of the Office of Emergency Management. John is a program manager with Emergency Management. Rico Barboza is the UCLA Fire Marshal. Larry Johnson is an officer with UCLA PD, and Zachary Morgenstein is an emergency specialist with UCLA Medical. So lots of people who have way more information about disaster preparedness than I do. We are recording this session, so I will have Lamb put in our chat our YouTube channel. So once I get time to upload it to our YouTube channel, I will send out that so you can share it with your friends and relatives and family so that they can also be prepared for disasters. So I can spotlight whomever is going to begin. So John, look at that, on top of things. Okay, so currently everyone is muted. If you have questions, please type them in the chat. I'll take directions from John when we can open it up to questions so that if you have a question, you can raise your hand and I can have you unmute to ask your question. Okay, and I submitted everyone's questions in advance, so I know we'll touch on those things. So without further ado, I will turn it over to John.
Thank you, Aisha. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you may be. We'll begin our presentation now, and with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa Martin, who's our first presenter.
So good morning. It's a pleasure to meet with all of you. My name is Lisa Martin. I am the director of the Office of Emergency Management here at UCLA. I've been handling emergencies, both in the private sector and the public sector for over 25 years, and I've been with the UC system for 16 of those. So I am almost ready to retire in just a few years, and I'm looking forward to that. But what we wanted to kind of do this morning is just kind of come and talk with you. Many of you I know were affected by the fires and our recent disaster here in January here in Southern California. Or those of you in our San Francisco area have been affected by other events. And so what we kind of wanted to just do was take a moment today and kind of talk about emergency preparedness and how to help prepare yourself and your families. Much of what you're going to hear, you will already know. This is not something new. It's things that we all learned and have been told for years and years and years. But hopefully from this presentation today, we'll be able to bring you just one or two things that we can share and that we can give you a couple of items that you can take away. So the first thing we'd like to do is kind of review the agenda. with you all. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about emergency preparedness and evacuations. We're going to talk about health preparedness. We're going to talk about active assailants, those that you may have heard are active shooters. We're now calling active assailants. We're going to talk a little bit about survivor's guilt. We've been asked to also address kind of some general fire safety things and provide you some resources. And then hopefully at the end, we will be able to have a Q&A period. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. Of course, it would not be a UCLA presentation, as you probably all know, without something from the great John Wooden. As you may know, he was our football coach from 1948 to 1975 with 27 seasons with the Bruins and 10 NCAA championships. One of the things that he always said was failure to prepare is preparing to failure. But what he simply taught his teams to try to do is to prepare themselves to the best of their ability so they could be the best that they could be. And then the result would take care of itself. So under that same kind of guidance, we're kind of saying, let's do a little preparedness up front. And the results, we cannot take care of everything that is going to affect us, but a little preparedness up front will absolutely assist in things further down the road. So some of the concerns and fears that we all share, we kind of want to just identify those and get those out there. It could be disruption of daily life and routine. It could be anxiety about the emergency response efforts. There's lots of communications and things that happen when emergencies occur or when we start getting that communication. There's going to be a communication breakdown or lack of information. We're going to want and my apologies. Thank you, Stacy. He was our basketball coach. We do have a new football coach, so I appreciate that. But we will have a lack of communication breakdown. We will want more information than what's going to be provided. And there may not be adequate resources for food or water or things like that. There's going to be potential damage to property. We're going to have anxiety about what do we take, how quickly do we evacuate if we're asked to evacuate. And there's often a fear of separation from loved ones and what's happening to our friends and our neighbors in the area. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about some potential emergencies. And these are kind of the general ones that we hear a lot in the news. But we'll get into a couple little specifics in just a minute. But it could be a water shortage or a drought. It could be flooding. Of course, recently we had the wildfires, earthquakes. We're feeling a lot of those lately for some reason. Power outages. We're getting all of these SEC notifications in our mail talking about we have to conserve power, especially coming into the warmer days of the summer. Public health emergency coming out of COVID. That's still a concern for many folks as we're hearing about some public health concerns across the country. Here in Southern California, heat waves is always a thing. And then with that, we've of course always have the terrorist threat. We have the new safety and security measures at all of our airports now, here, especially here in California, with needing the real ID and things like that to preserve our safety when we travel via air. But civil unrest is also a thing that we've seen historically in our country. So with that, let's talk a little bit about some planned and unplanned emergencies. There are various emergency types that happen. We have natural disasters, we have human-made situations, we have public emergencies, we have technology emergencies, environmental, we have structural failures that we've seen in other parts of the world. We have transportation situations. We have the Olympics coming up. So of course, we're going to be having some transportation impacts here in Southern California, but we've seen transportation emergencies throughout the country as well. Of course, social and civil unrest, and then utility failures is always a thing. So these are just some examples, whether it be an earthquake, a flood, a pandemic, an industrial accident or chemical spill. We've seen cyber attacks. We've, of course, experienced power outages. We've seen major highway accidents. building collapses or things like that, bridge collapses. We've, of course, had protests and civil disturbances. And then those things that we kind of have on a little more frequent is power outages and water supply disruption. So considering any of those, the one thing that we all know to be true is that in an emergency, we call 911, of course. And we all know that. We've known that for years and years. So I'm going to change this. So with that, of course, we're going to need to provide immediate care only to those who are trained to do so. So if you are trained in CPR, of course, complete CPR. When you talk to someone on 911, of course, follow their instructions. But always remember to have someone come to meet the first responders and lead them to the victim of whatever's going on. Okay. So one of the big things that we wanted to talk about today that was a little bit of confusion during the Palisades fire is the difference between an evacuation warning and an evacuation order. So an evacuation warning is you're not in imminent threat yet, but the probability is pretty high. So if you have an evacuation warning in your area, there is the potential to a threat to property, life safety, and things like that. And you should probably leave if you need that extra time. Evacuation order is an absolute, you need to evacuate. And as we saw with the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire and some of the others that we saw, the evacuation warning period can be very, very short. It can be an hour. It can be 6 hours. It can be a day and a half. It just kind of depends upon the flow of the fire, and the fire departments will then determine where the evacuation warning zones are and then when to convert those to an evacuation order. So that evacuation warning is not sometimes a lot of time. Depending upon the speed of the fire, you may go directly into an evacuation order, but an evacuation order is a lawful order to evacuate due to the immediate threat. Okay. So prior to an emergency, there's a couple of things. And we kind of use what's the state of California and LA County and others use around their areas. San Francisco has the same kind of thing. It's kind of that ready, set, go. What do we need to do? So those of you that live here in Southern California, LA County provides some really great resources. You can just go to fire.lacounty.gov and you can see emergency preparedness. They have checklists, they have plans, they have information on actions for various types of disasters and situations you may experience. They also have, if you would like to be trained on first aid or CPR, they can give you where those classes are. And they also kind of talk a little bit about what the community plans are. So that's one of the most critical things that you can do is learn about the community response plans in your local area. So we wanted to kind of give that information to you for those here in Southern California. For those up in the San Francisco area and others, look to your local county or city areas and they should have the same type of information. The next thing that you should do is use trusted alerts. So there are a lot of alert features and functions and applications and things like that out there. So I'm just going to kind of talk about those here in the Southern California area. The first one that I want to talk about is the Los Angeles Fire Department alerts. And so those alerts, you can go to lafd.org/alerts. And as Aisha mentioned, we're going to send you all of these slides. So you'll be able to click on the links and go straight to them. But over in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a bright red box that says, send me the alerts. You just fill out that information and you will be included. So anytime that they send an alert. Some of you may also know about the MyShake application on your phone. It's an application. It was developed up at UC Berkeley. So I have to give a shout out to them. And what this is it's an early warning application that you put on your phone, you download it, and it will give you a notification. You kind of set the standards of when you want to be notified. And what it will do is it will give you a notification. So as we just saw, of course, there was a recent earthquake down in Julian, down in San Diego County. During that period of time, this application sent over 700,000 alerts to users, and many of them received up to 35 seconds advance notice before they started feeling the shaking. So 35 seconds to some things does not sound like a lot of time, but 35 seconds, if you're staring at the clock on the microwave, is actually a pretty significant amount of time that you can get to someplace safe, or you can get outside, or you can get to your car and sit in your car for that earthquake shaking, whatever that is. So currently that application has over 4 million downloads. So that's one of the things that we wanted to share with you as well. Now, the other thing that we want to do, of course, is in evacuation planning. As I mentioned, the first thing that's critical and important is to stay informed. And we've kind of talked about that. The next thing, of course, is to have an evacuation plan. And in that plan, you're going to establish a communications plan, and you're going to build a disaster bag. So my suggestion is, because I know I have 3 adult children, and they're all in college, but they come back home and they have lots of stuff. So what we do is we build a wheeled disaster bag. I would rather roll a suitcase out or roll a duffel bag out to the car than try to carry all of their stuff. So one of the things that we need to do is, when you make an evacuation plan, is you need to assess your needs. And that's pretty much understand your personal situation. And we'll get to this evacuation plan in just a second. But you need to kind of understand what your personal situation is, your medical situation, your physical situation. Think about those who would help you respond. So who in the area, whether it's someone living in your home, whether it's neighbors, whether it's caregivers or family, will be able to help you if you need to evacuate or you need to get out. And then build that support network. So when you do that, kind of talk with them and kind of share this is the plan. Now, when you actually build your evacuation plan, there's a couple of things that you want to build in. So the first thing that you want to do is you need to determine if you need help evacuating. And then if you don't, or if you do, you've got that plan in place. Based on the fire safety situation, based on your needs, based on things like this, this is kind of a general idea that we share with anybody and everybody, regardless of your age, of what you should have in your evacuation kit to go. So please keep in mind, typically it's 1 bag per person with whatever those things are. If you have grandchildren living, or you have children living with you that are young, or you have pets, you're going to want to make sure that they have their needs met as well. Remember about prescriptions and medications, changes of clothes, your phones, your cell chargers, your phone books, directories, whatever those communication things are, you're going to want to take those. We talk about personal valuables. That's an individual situation. So you may have something that's very meaningful to you, very sentimental. So look at what those things are and be sure to include those at least on your list of things to grab. So one of the things that we kind of suggest is when you're looking at all of these things, you're not going to put them in a bag immediately for the most part. But if you have a list of those things, then it's easy to check it off. So in my family, when my children were younger, they all had a list. And if we had to evacuate, I gave each one of the kids their list, and they knew what they needed to go grab, and they knew what they needed to go get and where to put it. So as adults, we kind of do the same thing. I have the same list for my husband that says, don't forget this, don't forget that, and don't forget the important things. So one of those things, of course, is our important papers. Many of us in our homes, we have safes that have our important critical documents, or they may be in a safety deposit box, which is fantastic. But if those documents are in your home, make sure that you take the safety deposit box keys with you. Make sure that you take those important documents. So pull the files out of the safe instead of trying to grab the whole safe if you can't take it. But make sure to grab birth certificates, passports, and especially insurance cards and insurance policies. Those are often very, very critical. The other things is, as we go through this, in the heat of the moment, often we forget the most basics, which is our keys, our wallet, and our purse. And then with that, we always try to say, keep a little cash. So it doesn't have to be a whole lot, but keep a little cash with you that you have some access to. Don't forget the electronics. So your PC, anything like that, anything that you need to take with you. So, and then of course our pictures, the photo albums and those critical things. So my husband knows that one of the big things that he has to do is grab our photo albums. They're all in one location, but I've got a lot of them digitally, but those photo albums from our kids are critically important. Okay. So with that, the other thing that we need to do is, of course, make an evacuation plan for communications. Make that communication contact list of those folks and your support group, whoever that is, and make sure that you've got those numbers. Because in an emergency, oftentimes communications can be disrupted. So the last thing that I want to talk about really quick with this area is make sure that you know evacuation routes. So what are a couple of areas if you have to evacuate? Where is everybody probably going to go out of the track of your home or out of the area? Look for alternatives so that you can manage that if you need to quickly to get out of the area pretty quick. Okay, the next item that I want to share with you and last is the National Institute on Aging. And actually, I pulled this up for my husband and I because we're nearing retirement age. And I said, okay, what are those things that we're not thinking about that we probably need to? So one of the things that they also mentioned is non-perishable food and water. Of course, you should have a supply for at least 3 days. And I'm going to talk about that. And I'm also going to talk about the bottom one also is medications. So one of the things is for food and water, we kind of say have a 3-day supply if you can. When it comes to medications, I don't know about you, but what I do is my husband and I take our medications and I put them in the little, I take them out of the bottles and I put them in the little 7-day thing. And so remember to have at least a 1-week supply of those medications. And then what I do is I keep a 1-week supply in our emergency bags. And then about every 3 months, I rotate that supply out so that we make sure. Food and water, depending upon what it is, I think Twinkies have like a 37-year shelf life or something like that. Water, maybe not as much, but look to see what that is. Also, have access to flashlights and extra batteries, a first aid kit, hygiene supplies, and I love the fact that they say a sleeping bag and warm blankets. For us, it's going to be the comforter off the bed. It's going to be the blankets and the pillows off of our bed that we're going to throw in the back of the car if we need to. Of course, communication devices, change of clothes, glasses and hearing aids and hearing aid batteries. So my husband gets a new pair of glasses or I get a new pair of glasses. We take the old ones, we toss them in there. They're not going to be perfect, but if for some reason our primary glasses break, we have an alternate one pair. And then of course your health information and documentation. So we just wanted to kind of share, like I said, a couple little things that may be helpful for you to think about. But with this, the idea is that if you do a little bit of preparedness up front and a little bit of planning, it might be a little bit better off in that emergency heat of the moment if you have to evacuate. So I love Michael. Thank you so much. Vendors might also not have power or internet service, rendering your credit cards null and void. Excellent note. And as Karen mentioned, small bills are pretty much a better shot to go. So save those hundreds for something else. But yeah, have those smaller bills because you don't quite know exactly what you're going to need it for. Does food come commercially available in emergency kits? Does it spoil? And how often does it need to be replaced? That is a really excellent question. I can tell you Amazon has some great emergency packs. Every once in a while, so does Costco or Sam's Club. That can really help. So just look to see what those expiration dates are and pull it out. My suggestion is my parents got some quite a while back. We opened one up to kind of see what it is. And my dad instantly said, oh, heck no, I'm not eating all this. We're going to supplement it with stuff. So they're really great. And there are commercially available emergency kits, but make sure that they meet your dietary needs and you supplement with whatever else you need. Okay. Okay. And now I'll pass it on to Zach.
All righty. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zach Morgenstein. I'm an emergency management specialist at UCLA Health, and I'm really excited to be presenting to you all today. So next slide, please. So I'm going to be talking about medical emergencies and how to prepare yourselves an emergency management side on the medical side of things. So why emergency preparedness matters here in Southern California, as Lisa had mentioned, there's a lot of specific medical mobility or caregiving needs that you all may have. Also that in an emergency, their emergency response might be delayed and some self-reliance might be needed for about 7 to 14 days. It's really essential to make sure that we're planning potentially for up to 14 days. As we saw with the wildfires, it does take time for the emergency responders to get to us. And medical access and continuity care is critical in disasters. We need to have a plan to move forward with our medical plans. All right, next slide, please. All right, so just some key areas of focus that I'm going to be talking through. So some health preparedness best practices, some mobility and accessibility topics, some preparedness and response planning, and then community resources and support systems. And next slide, please. Okay, so some best practices to have just on like any day-to-day basis is just to have a couple things laid out. So first and foremost is our medication list. If you do take any prescription medications, it's really, really important to have a list of all medications, dosages, and allergies that you take. I myself get really bad migraines. I have prescription migraine medicines. I have a list of the medication that I'm on along with the dosage that I take. It's something really important to have just in case of an emergency. I started out as an EMT years and years ago, and lots of patients could tell me, oh, I'm taking this medication, but I don't remember the name. I don't remember the dosage I'm taking. And it became a little challenging for us as like on a response factor to like, what medications can we give to this patient? So it's extremely important to make sure that you have a backup documentation of those medications, of those dosages, just in case someone does need to know that, or if you need to go to an emergency room that maybe isn't familiar with your case. If you're a Kaiser patient and you have to go to a different hospital for whatever reason, it's really important to make sure that you have these lists. This way you can give it to the providers. This way they can know what they can or cannot give to you. It's also really important to have the backup prescription of your glasses. Ideally, if you have a backup pair of glasses, they've saved me many, many times, but it's really important to make sure that you have a prescription, a copy of it. As well as if you can, photos of medications and dosages is something else that can help identify what medications that you might be taking during an emergency. In a medical go bag, so it's really important to make sure that we are prepared, and having a medical go bag is extremely important, especially with making sure that you have up to 14 days of your medications that are stored in their original containers. It's appealing, to have the long tubes that have Sunday to Saturday with each, medication that you may need to take during those days, but making sure that you have the original containers with the dosages, the prescriber, and other information on there can help should you need to evacuate an emergency. This way, again, people know what medications you're taking. Also, backup pain medications is something really important. Emergencies and disasters are extremely stressful. As I mentioned, I get really bad migraines, and the last thing you need to do is, if you're evacuating, is to have to deal with like a really bad headache or your back is hurting or just anything along those lines. So having some extra Tylenol or Advil, aspirin, or a combination of all three, doesn't hurt, is really important to make sure that you have. It's better to have and not need than to need and not have. Also in the go bag is a portable power sources to support medical devices such as batteries or portable generators. They're really important if you or a loved one is on a device that is depending on electricity. It's really important to make sure that you have a backup power source for those. For medical providers, it's really important also to maintain a list of essential healthcare providers, such as your primary care physician, any specialists that you may see, their name and phone number, along with a copy of your insurance card. Really important to make sure that you have those if you needed to go to a different hospital system or a different doctor that may not be as familiar with your insurance. Having a copy of that insurance card really is important. And the next time that you meet with your primary care physician, it's something important in in response to the wildfires, talk to your doctor about emergency planning, any potential emergency medications, and if there's an ability to do video telehealth access during an emergency. Speaking for us during the wildfires, a lot of patients did take advantage of that and try to move their appointments to telehealth just to try to be able to still see their provider if they couldn't come into the office. So as I mentioned before, with some of the devices that you may need that you may or may not be on that require power, so those might be oxygen concentrators, nebulizers, feeding pumps, insulin pumps, ventilators, etc., along with other medical monitoring devices such as blood glucose monitors, blood pressure, and cardiac monitors. These devices are extremely important. They need to maintain, or they need to continue to have electricity provided to them, and making sure that you have a backup power source is really important to them. A lot of these devices do have a battery backup that's built into them, but sometimes they're not, they don't last super long. So it's important to make sure that you have a backup and a contingency plan just in case it does go down. So just so mobility and accessibility things to take into account during an evacuation is already stressful to begin with. And people that may use mobility or physical support devices such as canes, walkers, orthotic or prosthetic devices, braces, splints, it's important to make sure that you take these devices with you. If you are dependent on them, or if a loved one or family friend is using these, it's really important to make sure that you have that you take them with you and that you have an extra, if possible, in your emergency kit. These will, my mother, for example, has a really bad back. She uses a cane, and we make sure that we have a cane for her in our emergency kit. Otherwise, it would be really difficult for her to get around if we needed to evacuate. And then some other sensory assistance devices, so hearing implants, cochlear implants, glasses, magnifiers, as I was talking about earlier, speech generating devices, and vision enhancement tools. Really important to make sure that you come up with a backup, and if possible, have backup supplies of hearing aid batteries. They're only, it's spending a little bit of extra money to make sure that you have an extra supply of those could really help out in an emergency, and important to have in your emergency kit. And next slide, please. So other medical supplies that's important to have in your emergency kit, if any of these do apply to you. So wound care supplies, incontinence supplies, catheters or other urological supplies, colostomy and ostomy supplies, hard to say back to back, dialysis supplies, compression, and skin protection. Really important to make sure that you have additional of these supplies in your kit. It really will help make sure that you can continue any care that you need outside of your home. So just as important as keeping ourselves safe, we also need to keep our pets safe and service animals. They are essential partners, and we need to plan for their care just the same that we would plan for our own care. It's really important to make sure that you have in your emergency kit additional food and water for your pet. The way that we Lisa talked about earlier with the water, but making sure that you have additional water for them is really important as well as an extra leash, harness, and pet comfort items such as toys. This is really important if you're going to a shelter. A copy of vaccination medical records. A lot of times they want to make sure that the animals that are coming in are fully up to date with their vaccines and have proper medical records. If your animal has a service animal ID and microchip information, really important to keep copies of those listed in your emergency kit. And it's really important to know your rights under the ADA. Service animals are allowed in emergency shelters and transportation. They are not. You cannot be turned away from a shelter if you have an ADA service animal. So it's really important to know that your rights under the ADA, and then as well as plan for vet access if displaced. So luckily, at least here in Los Angeles, there's a lot of walk-in vet clinics and urgent cares that will take care of pets if needed. And it's really important to know that in your potential evacuation area, if the pet needs some sort of care, where you can get them that care. So it's important to know where they might be listed. And then also something else when you have time to practice entering and exiting vehicles with your service animal. It's really important to make sure that they are familiar with the car as well as making sure that they can get in and out easily. Okay, so coordinating with loved ones before disaster strikes. So something important on the medical side is we need to plan how to respond to things as a team, as Lisa had mentioned. We need to discuss scenarios together, based with our family and friends, based on the hazards that we live near. Also, we want to assign roles and responsibilities, determine who's going to help with what, such as emergency transportation if needed, medication, pets, etc. We really want to make sure that, you know, if you need your mother, or sorry, if you need your daughter to take you to, if she's the closest one to take you out to evacuate, you want to make sure that that's listed out and what the processes would be for an evacuation, what medications they need to take, pets, etc. If you're not home and they need to come to your house to get whatever items that you may need, it's really important to make sure that they know what they need to grab, and listing that out appropriately in your emergency kit will really help out. And then lastly, creating a communication plan. So sharing key contacts, establish your out of area emergency contacts and test regularly. So just making sure that you contact, you know, whoever your out of town emergency contact might be, as well as looking at what medical resources that they may have. If you're dependent on dialysis, for example, look to see what dialysis resources they may have in that area, and talk to your physician about, you know, if we needed to evacuate, what you know, here in Los Angeles, if I needed to evacuate, say, Orange County, what resources they have down there in you know, Laguna Niguel, where I would go, for example. So just looking at the area that you would evacuate to make sure that you have proper resources for yourself. Okay, and then just wrapping up here, so just some evacuation planning. So know your routes, so familiarize yourself with at least 2 evacuation routes in your specific area. I know it can be challenging. You know, in this day and age, we use Google Maps and Waze to go pretty much everywhere, but you know, at least in your back of your mind, have a way that you can get there if like cell towers are down. So take the 405 and just keep going until whatever exit I need to go to, just to make sure that you know which 2 ways you can get to if a road is impassable. As well as, you know, prep your go bag, like I was just mentioning earlier. So important medications, flashlights, water, important documents, cash, and clothes, and then arrange your transport support. So if you don't drive, pre-arrange help with family and or other city resources. And then lastly, so you're not alone, know who can help. So local emergency services, so know how to contact your local fire department, police, public health, and senior services. They'll really be your #1 resource during an emergency, especially the fire department and police. They're always available, they'll always be there to respond and help out as needed. Senior and community centers, so these will provide meals, transportation, wellness checks, and evacuation help. And then neighborhood support network, so local preparedness group or neighborhood response team. There's also the CERT, which is a community emergency response team, which is run by FEMA. They provide resources to local communities to help out during a disaster. So just summarizing in like your checklist and action plan. So you want to build and review your go bag. So like I was just mentioning, medications, water, documents, foods, flashlights. Have a 30-day supply, updated list, and in tech set. Sorry, that should be that's a typo. For telehealth access, and then finalize your family and communication plan. So have your shared contact list, evacuation routes, and assign roles.
Thank you, Zach.
That was it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's time today.
Can I just ask before we move on to Larry, are there any questions? I see a few people participating in the chat. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand and you can unmute. Any questions so far on the topics we've covered? Michael?
Thank you very much, Lisa and Zach. I have a question. We've gone through all of the preparedness for home. What about if you're not home, but in your car?
So, or I don't know if Lisa, you want to take this one, or if you want me to.
I'll take that one. Michael, that's a really, really great question, because oftentimes when something happens, we are not at home. So there's a couple of things that we should do. We should always have a bag of similar items in our car if that's available to us. Some have big cars that can handle things. But yes, you should have, and I appreciate that, Karen, you should have a go bag in your car also of some clothes, some extra shoes, some medication if you've got it, copies of some documents and things like that that you can get to. That's why one of the great things is having a safety deposit box or some other location. But yes, sometimes you are not available to do that, and that's just the situation. But if you can grab some of those things, put them in a bag, keep them in your car. Oh, Karen, that's a great idea. Your cert supplies are in the storage area above the spare tire. Fantastic. So, but try to keep as much as you possibly can in a smaller bag in your vehicle in case you are not home and you're not able to get to everything. And oftentimes when there is an evacuation order, I want to get this straight. When there's an evacuation order, they may not allow you to come back into the area in order to get things. So make sure you always have your ID on you to show that, yes, I'm in this area. If it's a warning, you can absolutely come back in and get those things. But if it's an order, they may not allow you to come back in. So just keep that in mind when you're packing those items for your go bag in your vehicles.
Okay, we can take maybe one more question before we move on. Make sure everyone on my screen. Okay, hold on. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Okay, thank you. Larry, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Larry Johnson. I'm a police officer for UCLA Police Department. Just to hit real quick on what Lisa Martin was saying, if it's an evacuation order, they will not. It's not a may not. They will not allow you to go back in. We were working the evacuations for the fires out here, helping Santa Monica PD and LAPD, and the orders were nobody goes back in. And then returning to my house during the Santa Clarita fires, the only reason I was allowed to get back in was I have a take-home police vehicle. So if you're driving a normal vehicle, they won't let you back in, so just be prepared for that. So the topic they asked me to speak on is an active assailant. Everybody used to refer to it as an active shooter. However, times have changed and people's methods change with time. And so an active assailant, real quick, is one or more persons who are randomly or systematically involved in the act of using deadly force on others, right? And their acts are not going to be stopped until they are stopped by law enforcement, either by being taken into custody or stopped by other means. So we can go to the next slide. These acts are often an act of terrorism, or they are lone wolf actors, such as what happens a lot of times at schools, but they've happened other places too, right? Like Route 91 was one of those incidents. The nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida, quite a while back now. But these events are on the rise. They have not slowed down. They can be perpetuated with firearms. They can be perpetuated with explosives, with vehicles, many different means. And so that's why it's referred to now as an active assailant. It's somebody that is looking to harm others, or a group of individuals looking to harm others. So a little bit about why I'm the one talking about this. I currently train all of UCLA Police Department's officers in the response to an active shooter or an active assailant event. I've been a police officer for about 20 years now. I started with a small agency out in Ventura County. I spent about 11 years there, with 9 of those years serving on the department's SWAT team, also as a canine handler and a gang officer. And then I came to UCLA about 9 years ago, and I've been a canine handler here. I'm currently assigned to Ronald Reagan Medical Center, and I train new police officers as well as all of our police department in the response to an active assailant. Okay, so what I want you guys to understand about surviving one of these events is, ideally, we want you to try to escape and get away from it as quickly as you can. All right, so whatever means you can take to get away from an active assailant, if you have enough time and distance to do that, ideally you're going to run or move away from it as quickly as you can. And then if you can't do that, what we want you to do is find a place that you can hide and barricade yourself in, to where the assailant will bypass you or not stop to engage you, either because they don't know you're there, or you've barricaded yourself into a location so well that they can't get to you. Once you're in a location like that, you can call 911. Now, most agencies also have text to 911. So a lot of people in an event like this, they're going to be afraid that somebody's going to hear them. They don't want to be heard. You can also text 911, and it will go to the closest law enforcement agency that is accepting text to 911. Just understand too, once you start texting an agency, it stays with that agency, even if you move. So if you're running away from an incident and you're texting 911, as you continue to run from this incident, you get into a vehicle, you continue to drive, even if you get out of that city, that text conversation that you initiated with the 911 service is going to remain with that agency. You can go to the next slide. In order to survive one of these incidents, the key factor is being aware of your surroundings. It's always an ongoing joke in law enforcement that you can always tell the cops in a room because they know where all the exits are. It's a joke, but it's also true. As police officers, we tend to be very alert and very aware of our surroundings. And it's why a lot of even off-duty police officers are not engaged as victims of crimes, because they tend to be focused or hyper-focused on things that the general public isn't necessarily always hyper-focused on. And it comes from doing this job day in and day out. So I would kind of relay that same thing to you, is be hyper-focused. When you enter a room, when you enter a building, what floor are you on? Those of you that worked UCLA, you enter into some of the buildings on this campus, you're on one floor, but you go to another side of that building and the exit may be on a different floor, right? There's some of the buildings on this campus, every side of the building is a different floor to exit that building. So being aware of where your exits are, where your stairwells, your elevators are located, the rooms that you're in, do the doors open in or do the doors open out? And this becomes prevalent if you're trying to barricade that door. If you're trying to barricade a door to keep somebody from getting to you, and the door opens out, barricading that door may not be the best option. Maybe finding a different room where the doors open in that you can now block that door from opening in. Knowing escape routes, if most of us, even being retired, you're still going to have buildings and locations that you commonly go to. Do you know escape routes from those locations? If it's a restaurant that you commonly go to, is there more than one way out of that building? Sure, the main entrance is where everybody comes and goes, but is there a back door? Are you aware of where that back door is? Is there a way to get out that maybe is the opposite direction of where an active assailant is coming through? You can go to the next slide. And then finally, understand the response that law enforcement is going to have. A lot of times people feel like law enforcement's response to situations may seem harsh or uncaring, or honestly that we're just kind of mean. And I get that response. I understand where people are coming from. But just so that people kind of understand where we're coming from, we're hyper-focused on what we're responding to. Somewhat to the point of tunnel vision. And especially if it's an active assailant, law enforcement's first priority is to stop that assailant, right? Whether that's taking that person into physical custody and arresting them or stopping them by other means. Until that person is stopped, they're going to continue to perpetuate their crime, which means they're going to continue to injure and or kill people. And so our primary focus is going to be identifying who that person is and stopping them by whatever means it takes. And so as we enter that building, we may be armed with rifles, we may be armed with handguns. You may see officers wearing plate carriers. They may look very tactical in their appearance because of the knowledge of what they're responding to. It's also a violent situation and it's a very dynamic situation. And the information that we receive may not be what is currently going on when we arrive, because that information is going to be a couple minutes old and things may have changed. And so the officers that are first getting there, they're going to be wanting to reevaluate the situation, and they're going to be looking to those people that are trying to run away from the situation to give them the most current and up-to-date information. What does the person look like? What are they wearing? Where were they last seen? What were they saying? And so the way that people can help us the most is by listening to the instructions we're giving them and exiting the building without things in your hands, showing officers your hands, keeping your hands high up in the air, and then understanding that we're going to be yelling and we may pat you down to confirm that you're not armed with a weapon. But we need to rule you out of being a suspect and then move past you so that we can get to that suspect, right? And so a lot of times the reason we're going to be yelling is there's a lot of chaos going on as people are running out of the building screaming. A lot of times fire alarms are activated. There may be music, right? A lot of people think these incidents are isolated to schools and stuff like that. But again, look at the nightclubs that have had these types of incidents. With the Route 91 concert in Las Vegas, they happen, unfortunately, at churches. Nowadays, the target that they are picking for these types of incidents are not very selective. They are going anywhere and everywhere where there is a large number of people, or a group of people that they have identified has done something wrong to them. So just understand that's kind of law enforcement's response when they're coming in, is to stop any further violence from happening. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes controlled aggression to stop violence. Next slide, please. And then the most important thing is, once these incidents are over and you survived that incident, is to take care of yourself. If you know people that have survived these incidents, taking care of those people is very important. Making sure that they get the help that they need, or you get the help that you need. A lot of times, PTSD or these types of incidents, they manifest themselves in weird ways, in ways that we don't even understand. And realizing that the change in your behavior or the change in a loved one's behavior is a sign that there's more going on than what they're letting on to, and making sure that they get access to the mental health help that they need so that they can work through what they've experienced. In law enforcement, we experience different acts of aggression and violence throughout our entire shift. So in a one-day incident, we may go to several different types of calls, and we just repress those emotions and we move on to the next call. We're not, like, that's not normal. That's not normal for any person to go through. And just understand that if you experience that, if you know someone that's experiencing that, be a good friend for them to talk to. Rely on those good friends that you have if you need someone to talk to, or seek out the mental health help from a professional that you need. This presentation is normally about an hour-and-a-half presentation. It is extremely condensed for you guys today. If this is something that you guys are looking at having more information on, you guys can reach out to UCPD through, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the group that this is part of, but like I said, it is its own longer presentation. We've just condensed it to give you guys a little bit of information. And I hope this has been helpful, but that's all I have unless anyone has questions.
If anyone has a question, please raise your hand. And I'll just say anecdotally, I was working at the school across town, and there was something where one of the faculty had had a mental breakdown and yelled active shooter. And I remember just freaking out, because it's a very scary moment to hear that. And people were running across campus, but it was just not a prank, but it was just something wrong with that professor. And I remember being petrified. And I also come from a generation that fully remembers 9/11 and Columbine. So it's definitely something where that really was important to, I think, people to hear about what happens when you're in a space where there is something happening on campus. And I think years ago, there was also an incident with a student at UCLA who had discussions with their professor and they were just distraught about their grades. So we live in this community where you just never know. And I don't want anyone to kind of feel like they can't live their life in public places without being concerned. Did I see Gail's hand up? No. Okay. Any questions? Please feel free to raise your hand. I think I have everyone on my screen. If not, feel free to unmute so I can see you because there's more of you than there are screens I have. Okay. All right. So one thing that this next topic came up because we had a number of retirees who live on the West Side or they have friends and family that they've known for generations that were impacted by somehow the fires or just in general seeing it on the news every day and people whose community was affected, but their house was still standing. So I know that this next topic is something where people were really having mixed emotions about survivor's guilt and how to process those emotions and still kind of move forward with your own life. So the next one is John. Okay. Ready, John.
Thank you, Aisha. And thank you, Larry, for your content prior to my portion of today's presentation. I'll be covering some topics similar to or following on from Larry's closing comments. So to understand survivor's guilt, it's probably best to start with what constitutes a traumatic event. And it is a form of mental injury that can be experienced whether you were directly impacted by an event or you witnessed an event. And that latter part is something that's kind of been missed at times where people may not believe a person was affected, even though they were only an observer to what occurred. And this can often leave people with feelings of being overwhelmed or helpless or isolated or a sense of powerlessness. And they can occur from a sudden accident, a serious illness, natural disasters, acts of violence. In a number of situations, things that can just throw you out of your normal feeling of being in control of your daily life. So survivor's guilt specifically is a psychological condition where folks will experience guilt after surviving that event where others did not, or at least they feel that they didn't experience as much harm or trauma as others did. And the symptoms of this are feelings of guilt about having survived or not having been as impacted as others, flashbacks to the event, a lot of second-guessing decisions that were made either during or following what occurred, and then difficulty resuming your normal life. And then equally feelings of being depressed or post-traumatic stress, where part of my background prior to joining UCLA was I worked with the military as a consultant as well as FEMA and the Department of Defense when it came to disasters and other related topics. And so post-traumatic stress is a very wicked thing. It can pop up on someone after quite a bit of time has passed, and where they feel, I'm fine, and then suddenly they start having things happening where they're left confused as to why they're suddenly feeling this now. So some strategies for coping. Number one is acknowledging what you're feeling. Suppressing how you're feeling doesn't necessarily help with the healing process, and you have to be willing to kind of engage with the healing process. Discussion with those that you find safe or supportive, that can be family, friends, or professionals, to enable you to at least discuss how you feel about it, even if you feel perhaps even uncomfortable or embarrassed about how you feel about those events. Trying as best as possible to resume your daily routine, schedule, even if it's a light schedule, to try and build some normalcy back into your life, and self-care by being open with yourself about what you're feeling, the fact that you may feel fatigued or even burned out after these events have occurred. And then dietary. Something, again, where I had some experience with this in everything from the earthquake professionals out of the country of Argentina, as well as a number of disaster personnel around the world. where it's everything from earthquake or buildings collapsing on people or what have you. Your body is really going to undertake a lot of the stress in ways you may not even be aware. And so some of the key things to keep in mind with that are making sure that you're eating properly and regularly, and that you're getting the nutrients you need. And one of the biggest is hydration. What the United Nations refers to as oral rehydration therapy, basically water with some degree of salt and sugar mixed in the right combinations. But we know these as electrolyte drinks and similar. Those are very, very critical. You may be dehydrated or similar in ways you're not even aware. And that's why it's very important to keep up proper hydration, not just water, but things that contain electrolytes. And then some resources along these lines. And these websites will be available to you in this presentation that we will provide following today's discussion. And these will be available for you. Also, another thing is certainly commend everyone for the comments in the chat. That's also a helpful part of these sorts of presentations, is to allow all of you to kind of work together as far as topic matter you want to cover, or suggestions or ideas that you have as well. So with that, turning over to Rico Barbosa, our fire marshal.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chief Barbosa, Campus Fire Marshal for UCLA. And before I begin my presentation, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedules to take a proactive approach about your general safety of yourselves and your loved ones. And I also want to congratulate all the retirees for making it where you're at right now. Some of us still have to get up at 4 in the morning to come to work. But for those of you that are retired, again, congratulations. And I thank you for participating in this presentation. Next slide. Okay, before I start the actual presentation, I just want a minute to talk about myself and where I came from. I was an undergrad at UCLA. Upon finishing, I became a police dispatcher for the UCLA Police Department for 7 years. And during that time, I went through the Weekend Fire Academy on the weekend. So it was about 1.5 year long process. After graduating, it took me a couple of years. I got hired initially by UCLA Campus Fire Marshal's office as a deputy fire marshal, and I rose in the ranks in that. In 2015, I left to go to this Alhambra Fire Department. I spent 2 years in their fire prevention program, and then after that, 3 years at Torrance. And in December 2020, I came back to UCLA in the middle of the pandemic to assume the fire marshal position. So total, I've been 30 years in the public safety realm, working for the public, and 23 years in the capacity in the fire service. It's just a little bit about me. So I learned 1 or 2 things along the way. Now, if you look at your screen, general fire safety, the National Fire Protection Association, which is a global nonprofit organization dedicated to reducing fire and related hazards, they write, seniors 65 and older carry twice the risk of injury or death in a fire as compared to the general population. But don't let this intimidate you or look bad upon this. The good news is we could prevent property loss, injury, or even death with a couple of things, and that's education and learning how to be prepared. So take heed and take good note of all the resources and information that we provide. You could lower the risk. So just keep that in mind. Next slide. Okay, continuing. Smoking is the leading cause of fire fatalities in the age group 55 to 84, according to NFPA. Why, you ask? Well, seniors and retirees are most likely on medications that could potentially make them drowsy. Some seniors nod off while the act of smoking. Now, why it's interesting why people would smoke nowadays, considering the health hazards, but people do. And just keep in mind that if you engage in such activity, I'm not the smoking police or anything. You are in your residence. You could do whatever you want. I don't regulate private residences. But if you do engage in this activity, just be cognizant. Make sure whatever you're using, a cigarette pipe or cigars, that they're off completely. I know that during the afternoon, I kind of need a little pick-me-up, and if you're at home and you're engaging in smoking activity, we could nod off. So that's one of the main causes of it. And also, if you're doing it while you're in bed or getting before you sleep, it's very important that you turn off any type of smoking cigarette pipe or cigar. Also, unattended cooking is the number one. Let's go back to the cooking is the number one cause of fires at home, according to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Why, you ask? Well, sometimes we forget to turn off the stove. As I'm getting in my mid-50s, as the years go along, my memory is kind of not as it used to be when I was a young spring chicken. So the other reason is sometimes we don't realize that articles of clothing are caught on fire. Our senses may dull as we get older, and that's just reality of life. Our reflexes, our motions slow down a bit. So just keep that in mind when you're cooking. Make sure you turn off stoves and ovens and things of that nature. Next slide. Other hazards to consider: space heaters, electrical blankets, and other heating equipment. These all pose risk. Make sure you read the manufacturer's instructions on how to use them, connect them, unplug them, and ensure that no combustible, anything that burns, is near them. Try to keep a minimum of 3-foot clearance of anything that causes a heat source. Use metal screens for fireplaces, and make sure you clean your chimneys regularly. Use flashlights instead of candles in an emergency. Why do we not want to use candles? You may have a gas leak. Some of our smelling capabilities tend to diminish as we grow older. So using flashlights, batteries is a great alternative. If you have events, decoration, use battery operated flameless candles as an alternative. There's a lot out there in the market, so keep that in mind. Next slide. Okay, continuing, smoke alarms and CO2 detectors. Make sure that your home has them, or your place of residence. Install at least one smoke alarm per floor. Put one inside each bedroom and one each outside each sleeping area. Test each alarm once a month. Make sure you replace the batteries, and make sure you change them out every 10 years. If possible, if you have the resources, have an electrician interconnect the smoke alarms. There's the technology out there. What that means is, if there's one smoke alarm that goes off in any portion of your residence, then all of them go off at the same time, so you're able to hear it. And ensure you could hear them without the use of aids, hearing aids. More than half of every emergency occurs during sleeping hours, so keep that in mind. Next slide. Hear the beep where you sleep. Like I said, make sure you're able to hear them. The emergencies happen when we sleep. Here's an illustration, and you're going to get a copy of this, of where you should install them. And there's some other instructions in the bottom portion of this slide. Next slide. Make sure once you install them that you check them. Smoke alarm is no good if it's not functioning. Test them at least once a month to make sure that they're working, that they're interconnected, and it would pay dividends. It's one of the ways that we're able to be alerted of an emergency so that we're able to evacuate. Next slide. Other alternatives to smoke alarms due to hearing impairment or hearing loss. There's devices out there that are mixed. They have low-pitched sounds that are not like traditional smoke alarms that you're able to hear. Some of them have a vibration notification appliance that you could put under your pillow or shake your bed that would notify you that there's an emergency. And there's also, we could put strobe light. Some of you are light sleepers, I may be able to see the lights and advise you or alert you of an emergency. So that technology is out there, and it's all, you could use your Google to research it. And like I said, make sure that you contact a licensed electrician to help you if you decide to go with some of these alternatives. Next slide. Fire extinguishers, very important to have them in the home, to have at least one in your vehicle or any other place where you're at. Not all extinguishers are the same. Each extinguishers are different in that they fight different types. The most common extinguisher is the multi-purpose dry chemical. That's the powder, because that's you're able to extinguish most fires like that. Now, the type of fires, if you look at the fire extinguisher, starting from the top A, you have ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, rubber, fabrics. A class B fire is flammable liquids, gasoline, paints, liquors, lacquers, actually liquor too could be a flammable liquid. You have a class C, energized electrical equipment, anything that's plugged in. The special case about a class C, if you're able to safely unplug it or cut the power source to it, it becomes a class A because there's no energy flowing through it. So just keep that in mind. Some of our specialty extinguishers, especially here on campus of UCLA, we have a class D that's for combustible metals or metal alloys. These are special type of extinguishers that we use. And some of when you have cooking at the bottom, the class K for kitchen. This is for anything that involves cooking deep fat, vegetable oil, or animal fats. Now we're going to show you how to use a fire extinguisher. Next slide, please. Okay, how do you use them? Remember the acronym PASS, P-A-S-S. Okay, what does that stand for? The first P is to pull the pin. Why do we have a pin there? It's there attached with the plastic seal. The reason there's a pin is to avoid accidental discharge. You're not able to squeeze the handle with that pin there. So it's very important that you pull it out, or if you twist it to break that plastic seal and remove the pin. Okay, so you want to grab at that point, you want to grab the handle and then grab the hose at the end and aim at the base towards the bottom of the fire. Okay, not on top or to the side. You want to aim at the base because that's where the combustion is occurring. Okay, make sure you're safely away from it, usually 6 to 10 feet. It depends on the actual situation. You want to squeeze the handle to let the agent come out, and it could be powder, it could be water, it could be even carbon dioxide. The most important thing is you want to sweep side to side at the base, not up and down, not in a circular motion, not in a number 2 or number 3 or any alphanumeric combination. You want to sweep side to side, okay? And step back, looking at the fire or looking at the situation to make sure you put it out. You don't want to put face away from it and have your back towards it and then have it rekindle. You want to make sure that it's extinguished, that sort of thing. So that's how you use a fire extinguisher. Next slide. Okay, we've heard about preparedness. We heard about evacuation procedures. So I have a couple comments on that. Like we said, have 2 escape routes in case one is blocked. Drill as much as you can with your people you reside with your loved ones or whoever can help you use that plan. Keep it real important. Keep those escape routes clear of any obstructions. Do not block doors or stairs. You can have the best escape route, but if there are items preventing you to get out, how good is it? So make sure those are always unobstructed. One of the best recommendations I could make right now is if you're having mobility issues for whatever reason and you live in a multi-story dwelling, is try to sleep on the bottom floors or spend much of your time if you can, because it's easier. Think about it. If you think about it, it's easier to exit the residence or the building or wherever you're at. So just consider that wherever you're at. Okay. Next slide. Okay. During an actual emergency, if there is smoke present, try to stay low to the ground if you can. Okay. Close the doors if possible to stop the smoke and flames from spreading. This is compartmentalizes the emergency to that area. It won't help it spread. Do Do not gather your personal belongings. Everything is replaceable, but you are not. We want you to get out of the building and meet in a pre-designated location according to your evacuation plan. And why is it that I want you to do all these things? Is because I personally want you to live as long as possible, to check every possible item on your bucket list. And also for you retirees that are drawing a pension from the University of California, I want you to draw every possible dollar that you can from the retirement system, because honestly, you've worked hard and you've earned it. So keep that in mind. I want you to be alive for as long as you can. Next slide, please. One final thing, and of course, when it's safe to do so, call 911. Like I mentioned earlier, I was a police dispatcher for 7 years. So I was the one that would actually pick up the line and say, 911, what's your emergency? If you remember two things when you're calling 911, that's to say what's going on and where you're at. Okay, two of the most important. The dispatchers will prompt you for more information, but with those two things, we could start getting emergency resources, whatever it is, and the appropriate one. So just remember what's going on and where, an address, an intersection, what's going on. We have a fire, we have a medical emergency, we have a person that doesn't seem to be behaving well or something like that. That way we can send the appropriate person. So keep that in mind. Next slide. Okay. That finishes my presentation. John, Lisa?
I will move into resources unless Ayesha, you wanted to pause.
Let's see. I saw some questions in the chat about fire blankets. I know I've seen commercials about fire blankets, so I'm curious if anyone has any opinions on using those.
Personally, I have not used one myself, but they're out there. The thing that I would recommend is to make sure that they're listed for use. Make sure that they're approved for it. Usually Underwriter Laboratories or FM approve a product like that for their use. But also you can use baking soda on a stove fire. On a stove fire, do not use water because that could spread, that sort of thing. Or you could turn off the heat or take whatever pot or pan you're using off and put a cover on it at the top of it, and that could usually suffocates it. So those are some quick things about a stove fire.
And I don't recall if these two apps were mentioned. I think maybe one was, but during the wildfires in Los Angeles, there's an app called Watch Duty that I would get alerts from that was way more responsive to kind of see what was happening blocks from me. So it's called Watch Duty, as in like Watch Duty, DUTY. And then another one that I've always been on is called Citizen. And the Citizen app basically is like a hyper local informative thing where people can say, down the street there's a missing dog, or down the street I hear fireworks. But it's people in your own area that are helping you kind of see what's going on. You can report things as well. So I will put those two iPhone apps in the chat. I don't know about Androids, but they're definitely great apps to like be notified what's happening in your neighborhood. Any other questions before we move on to resources? And I will say just one additional resource that I've been working with our local Red Cross agency in Santa Monica, and they were generous enough to offer us these emergency to-go bags. So I have about 3 or 4 cases of them, and I considered having people to mail them out, but they're a bit heavier and bulkier. So I will say, if you're in Southern California, feel free to come by the ERRC, and you're more than welcome to have these bags. They have an emergency water, a whistle, and some other little goodies, but they're more than welcome for you to have. It's first come, first serve. So please feel free to stop by our office so you can pick up one of your Red Cross bags. If you email me directly and you're not in Southern California, I can likely ship you one. I just have a budget and we're at the end of the fiscal year, so I need to be mindful. But send me an email directly that you would like one or two, and I will do my best to get you one. I just, budgets, we all know California budgets. So yes, so if you're Southern California, please feel free to come by and pick up one. And someone did message me about shipping. So, okay, so about resources, is that you again, John?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And two items. One, to dovetail off of Aisha's comments, is regardless of what metropolitan area you may be living in, a number of cities across the United States, especially the last 2 to 3 years now, have systems in place where all you need to do is go to a website run by the city. They will provide you a location. You enter your cell phone number, and you can tailor the alerts you receive, whether it's a missing person, whether it's weather, whether it's major bridges or what have you might be impacted. That also is another option who's available. And I noticed Nancy's comment in the chat, which I believe Lisa also covered that as well, which is, yes, taking photos of key documents that you have. You can either save those to a memory stick and put them in a firebox, or just keep them on your phone is an excellent way to make sure that you have your important documents available. So before we open up for final Q&A, some additional resources that will be in this presentation for you when we send this out. Some of these are very Los Angeles specific. Some are not, especially towards the bottom there between FEMA and the American Red Cross. And again, if you just do some basic searches in your state or city, you will probably find more resources available now than there used to be. Also, if you go to the download or app purchase tool on your cell phone, whether it's an Android or an iPhone, if you just conduct some searches there, you may be surprised by some of the items that you'll find there as well. So with that, we are your presenters, and we thank you for joining us today. And with that, we'll open the floor for any final questions anyone may have, or Aisha, any follow-up comments you may have for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for hosting this. I know this is a really important topic, is a hard one to digest. I will put our address in the chat, but I will also, John's going to send me his final slides, and I will share that with everyone that registered for the Zoom. So in that email, I will follow up with all the links that people suggested about the NFPA and CERT and the 2 apps I mentioned, and you'll have our address for the department. We are still semi-hybrid, so I just ask that you email us before showing up in case we're out doing an activity or take a vacation. So any other questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, and we can answer any last-minute questions you may have about this important topic.
I do see that Nancy had a question. Does the food that comes in the commercially available emergency kits spoil? And how often does it need to be replaced?
Mm-hmm. So I think I can address that one for Nancy.
Yeah, they addressed it. Right.
Yeah, it depends upon the kit that you purchase, right. Nancy. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I think most of those kits last 3 to 5 years. I know Costco had a gigantic bucket that had food inside that could also double as like toileting. So there's other things you go see. I know Amazon has tons of kits, but I implore you to go to your local brick and mortar store just to see what they have. Big Five might still have them somewhere, or Dick's Sporting Goods. So a lot of these places still have supplies in person. You can check out. Even for the emergency bag, go to your local Red Cross. They are willing to give you supplies free of charge. I wasn't expecting 4 boxes, but she loaded up my car. So let's see. So yes, I will follow up with our address, the links in the chat, the YouTube recording of this video. Any other final questions that anyone might have about any of the topics we covered? Okay, well, I'll let you have some more of your afternoon back. It's great seeing you all, Southern and Northern California. Thank you to all our presenters. Whenever you're ready to retire, just come on over or send us an email. We'll definitely help you with that process. And we really appreciate you for taking your time today. Take care.
Thank you.